Morning everyone and welcome to Mscsports' first webinar of 2021. We will be discussing some of the opportunities that exist for rights holders to deliver growth during these uncertain times, as well as looking ahead to what is certain to be both challenging and exciting new normal for the global sports industry. We're delighted to have you with us today, and we really appreciate you making the time, especially during what continues to be a really challenging and uncertain time for many of us. My name is McEwan, and I'm the head of our Insight Strategy and Creative team at Mscsports. I'm just going to allow a few more minutes for people to join us, and in the meantime, I'll talk you through the plan for today and how the session is going to be run. For anybody who hasn't met us personally before, or anybody who we haven't been in contact with for a while, Mscsports is a full-service sport and entertainment agency with an obsession around delivering measurable impact for rights holders, sponsors, and athletes through what we have termed our impact marketing solutions. We're based in Johannesburg, and we have a network of suppliers and partners across South Africa and internationally. In terms of today's agenda, first up, we'll be hearing from Luca Massaro, founder and CEO of WePlay, a performance-driven sports marketing agency who are headquartered in London with offices in Paris, Madrid, and New York. WePlay's work stretches across the full digital landscape, supporting rights holders, broadcasters, clubs, leagues, and platform partners around the world. Luca will be unpacking how to achieve growth in the digital age. And this is a topic we're particularly excited to be discussing today, as we have spent most of the last 18 months learning from and working with the team at WePlay to help us develop and refine an offering that is aligned to their performance-driven approach, but obviously relevant to the South African market. Following on from Luca's presentation, we will have a Q&A session with Edgar Rathbone, CEO of the Blue Bulls Company, a South African rugby union that needs little introduction. A qualified chartered accountant, Edgar left the auditing world in his dust and joined the sports industry through first gaining some experience at the Lions, with roles in stadium management and sports commercialization. And that was followed by his appointment as CEO to the Bulls in early 2020. And he's one of the exciting new generation of young leaders in the South African rugby landscape. Since his arrival at the Bulls, the performances of the team on the field have been very impressive. They've won both the Super Rugby Reloaded, which was the continuation of the Super Rugby tournament that was cancelled due to the pandemic, as well as the Currie Cup in his first year at the helm. We'll be touching on the team performances, as well as looking ahead at this exciting move into European competitions, and obviously picking up on some of the themes from Luca's presentation and focusing on how they as rights holders are positioning themselves for the future. And then our final speaker of the day will be our very own Neil Jankelowitz. As co-founder and CEO of Mscsports, Neil will be unpacking our impact marketing offering that I referred to earlier in a little bit more detail, particularly how it is suited to help our clients achieve growth, as well as picking up on one or two points from our earlier conversations with Luca and Edgar. You are all on mute and will remain that way for the duration of today's session, but we absolutely welcome questions throughout the conversations with our guests, and we will do our best to answer them for you. The Q&A function is on the Zoom panel on your screens, and the questions will come through directly to my team working in the background here, and they will filter them through to me to be asked as and when is appropriate. Finally, we will be sending out a recording of today's session to all of our guests over the next week, so please do feel free to share it with colleagues and anyone else that you think may be interested in learning about what we have shared today. That is just about enough from me, so let's get going. I'm going to hand over to Luca in a second, who will be joining us from his office in London, and he will take us through his presentation, followed by any questions that might come through. Over to you, Luca.
Thanks, Grant. I'm just going to share screen. I think you're very kind, Grant, saying that I'm from my office in London. Very kind. I'm in my shed, in my garden, actually. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's exciting to be here today and support the guys at MSC. We've been on a really fun journey with Grant, with Neil, with Stephen, and the MSC team over the last 18 months. And hasn't the whole world been on quite a journey over the last year? So firstly, I hope this finds you all doing very well in these truly extraordinary times. My name is Luca. I'm the founder and CEO of WePlay. Today, I'm going to talk to you about winning in the digital age. What is winning in the digital age? In sports, everyone's familiar with the term winning. However, in marketing and in business, the term winning could mean many things. We like to keep things simple. Winning equals business growth. Now, my agenda this morning is about 15, 20 minutes tops. It's going to be split into 4 sections. Firstly, a short introduction into WePlay. I'll then share with you some insights into the market called the state of play. Following on, I'll share a strategic framework, which is focused entirely on achieving measured business growth. And finally, some summarized takeouts for you. So about WePlay, we are a sports marketing agency that has been built for the digital age. We are a performance marketing specialists, which means that we drive audience and revenue growth for sports organizations and brands. We are multi-award winning, 2-time agency of the year. We're a team of 40 analysts, strategists, creatives, and media experts based primarily in Europe, but also in North America. We're a retained agency to some of the world's biggest sports brands, and we're official marketing partners of what we call the Silicon Valley elite, which includes Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. So start at the beginning. What is performance marketing? So performance marketing is the evolution of digital marketing, where the focus is not only on the outputs, but on the outcomes. So those outcomes, they land in 2 columns. We have audience growth, which includes social growth, database growth, app downloads, web traffic, content engagement, market awareness. And we also have revenue growth, which includes tickets, season tickets, hospitality, e-commerce, subscriptions, memberships, advertising revenue. Now, I'll get into this in a lot more detail throughout the session. WePlay serves the global sports industry, and we sit where sport meets with digital. We partner with the world's leading rights holders, broadcasters, and brands. And we're an incredibly diverse business working across 15 different sports, from football and golf to mixed martial arts, to world rally, and even equestrian. We are experts in sports and digital across a spectrum of key work streams that includes audience development, which is growing and engaging audiences globally across social and digital platforms. Example shown here is with the World Cup at Home campaign that we delivered with FIFA in 2020. There's subscriptions, which includes the fast-growing subscription video on demand market, but as well as membership and loyalty programs. We've got venue and live events, which is the development and the execution of strategies to drive attendance, hospitality, but also mass participation. We have this emerging subsector called digital sponsorship, where performance marketing enables rights holders to deliver against their partner-led sponsorship objectives. For example, the example shown here is Paris Saint-Germain and Nivea. And then we also have e-commerce, which is fairly self-explanatory, which is sales of official and licensed products. Now, we deliver this through a best-in-class performance marketing service offering that's underpinned by 4 areas. We have strategy and insight, which is data-driven, commercially focused analysis that fuels the strategy development. As you can imagine, to achieve the level of performance that we're often tasked with, you have to start with science. That then leads into content marketing, and this is all about the content narratives, understanding the platforms, how to optimize them, and then how to monetize them directly. We then have our creative studio, which is where the development of the digital assets and the visuals to engage target audiences. And then finally, media and technology. That's hyper-targeted paid media and advanced advertising technologies to achieve actions and transactions at scale. So in summary, we are an agency that has been primed for this new world. We are digital experts specializing in sport, and we deliver unrivaled growth, underpinned by a figure of £200 million in new revenues achieved just in the last 4 years alone from our performance marketing activity. So now I'll take you through some of the macro insights that are influencing the growth of the digital side of sports. The first is what everyone is synonymous with, is the impacted global sports economy. We've seen ongoing restrictions to live sport and venue attendance being impacted to an estimated $73.7 billion. Furthermore, there's a downturn in the global economy, which is affecting sponsorship investments, as brands have to be seen at least to act more responsibly with their marketing budgets to avoid any further economic uncertainty. We have the affected product itself and the value, where broadcasters are challenging the cost of TV rights fees with the lack of live sport and ongoing fan restrictions that are affecting the value of the product. And then there is this uncertainty around when will normal service resume. And sport is encountering challenges that it's never faced before. And the pandemic will continue to affect the sporting world for the foreseeable future. So these are the macro challenges. However, let's not all be down and depressed about it, because where there is adversity, there is opportunity. So we've seen increases in digital advertising spend grow by 8% year on year. And that's expected to grow further as brands go direct to consumer, where digital is the most effective way to reach an audience. We've got the rise of e-commerce and digital monetization, where we've seen e-commerce sales in sports up over 200% year on year. Then we've seen new digital currencies emerge, like NFTs, and other ways to now monetize your digital assets. And then we've seen this increased digital normalization with record increases in home media, content streaming, internet usage, and more time being spent on social media than ever before. So in summary, while COVID has created this incomprehensible adversity, with it has arrived a plethora of opportunity. There's never been a more important time to invest in digital, and there's never been a more important time to invest in building your audience. So that's the state of play. Now in this section, I'm going to share with you a framework for how WePlay helps companies to win through performance marketing. And it's all about growth. Now, growth is crucial to the long-term survival of any business. And our job as an agency is fundamentally to help our clients and their businesses to grow. So that growth, as I mentioned earlier, comes in two forms. We have audience, which is growing an audience of people that regularly engage with your brand and your content. And then we have revenue growth, which is growing revenues through both direct and indirect revenue streams. Now, in passion platforms such as sport and entertainment, the audience is actually a currency for revenue growth itself. Thus, whatever drives audience drives revenue through products, monetization of content, but also through commercial media partnerships. So by investing in building your audience, you are also future-proofing your business. Now let's look specifically at audience growth and break down some of the key verticals that underpin how we measure audience growth. So the first is the scale, which is the audience volume of size. Then we're into the coverage, measured by the growth in market penetration and fan demographics. The third is value, which is the time spent on platforms, how engaged the audience is, and ultimately the audience's purpose and intent on taking an action or a transaction with you. Now, the final vertical is about the future proofing and understanding how you can gather an audience of a younger demographic. So we know what we need when we're looking at building an audience, and we know these principles for building an audience. But then there's the question is, okay, so I've got an engaged audience, but we aren't generating direct revenue yet. So what are the expectations? So that is a good question to ask. Now, so our data, which is derived from thousands of campaigns, shows us that engaged audiences are twice as likely to purchase a product versus an unengaged audience. They spend twice as much money versus an unengaged audience. They convert more frequently, and they generate a higher return on ad spend. So we know audiences, particularly in sports and entertainment, are valuable to our business. And we now know what we should be measuring. So the next question is, how do we find new audiences? So here is where we talk about the WePlay audience onion. We call it an onion because an onion has a very thick but relatively small core. And that core represents the core of your customer base, where people will know a lot about your brand and are likely to purchase. And the analogy here that I think we can all recognize is, take Apple, for example. When Apple releases a new phone, you have a core audience of people that are willing to camp outside the Apple store in the rain, in the cold, waiting for the phone. That represents the core loyal customer base. However, it's a fairly small segment. But as we peel back the layers of the onion, those layers do start to get a little bit thinner, but they also get a lot larger. And those layers represent the opportunity to reach new audiences, but understanding that the depth that the audience has of understanding of your brand is going to be a lot thinner. Thus, they're less likely to purchase. So we have to consider them and how we take them on a journey. And the onion is a key part of our audience segmentation process. It's crucial for defining strategy, particularly for how we market a brand, product, or service. So once you've defined audience segments, you can now look at the platforms that you will utilize to reach these audiences. So we take what's called a platform agnostic approach. Now, platform agnostic means we don't necessarily care about platforms. We actually care just about audiences and audience behavior. So we follow the platforms where the audiences spend their time. Now, that channel planning is split into these three verticals. We have social, which is content and interest led. Now, this includes the usual suspects like Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, Snap, TikTok, etc. Social is where audiences spend the majority of their time, particularly when it comes to sports. And social is a perfect landscape for sports because, like sport, social is content and interest led. So typically, this is where every sports marketing campaign will start, with powerful content and storytelling. Now, search is intent and demand led, meaning the audience will come to you via search engines when they are interested in something. And finally, we have these immersive experiences in the display programmatic world, where we can reach audiences through environments such as Amazon, such as smart TV, PlayStation, Xbox, Twitch, etc., where audiences have a much higher propensity to be involved in an interest, but also looking at their dwell times. So the final part of the process is to develop the strategy for reaching these audiences via these platforms. So at WePlay, we develop bespoke funnel strategies that take audiences on a journey from awareness through to conversion. The first thing to point out is that the goal may differ at each stage of the funnel. For example, the goal when running a brand awareness campaign is to reach a widest audience as possible and achieve audience growth. But as we move further down the funnel, we're taking these audiences on a journey. We're deep in their relationship with the brand. After engaging the target audience, we may be ready to present them with a sales message. So the same process is taken when focusing on retention and combating against churn. But now what we can do is we can start to align the platforms you've seen in the previous slide with the funnel. So you can start to see how it might come together. At the awareness stage, we're going very wide. We're targeting audiences across all of the three verticals: social, search, and display. And this is because we want to build a big audience pool. We want to test, we want to assess, we want to understand how people engage with our advertising. As we go further down, we might start to bring in richer content environments, such as YouTube advertising, where audiences are going to be watching specific content and we want to advertise to them with specific messaging around that content. As we go further down the funnel, we get even more targeted, where the objective moves from engaging to converting. And then when we talk about retention, this is essentially just about keeping your audience engaged with entertaining content, regular programming updates and schedules, but also new product features. So now we've gone through the detail of how we reach, how we engage audiences, and we've looked at the framework for how you measure audiences. So now we need to look at a framework for how we start to commercialize those audiences. Now, commercial monetization can be split into two. You have direct revenue and then you have indirect revenue. Now, what we talk about at WePlay and what we deliver is what we call the 3 Ps of monetization, which is direct to consumer products, partnerships and sponsorship, but also this new world of programmatic monetization. So the 3 Ps of monetization is a framework to turn engaged audiences into revenue. So we have products, which is the direct to consumer revenue growth through venue and live events, e-commerce, retail, subscription video on demand, membership programs. This is a fast growing area accelerated by COVID, as you saw earlier, with the increased normalization around digital consumption and spending. We then have partnerships, which is the increase in revenue streams through the development of digital first partnerships, packages, rights, and content. And then we have the programmatic monetization world, another fast growing area where a lot of the platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Snap have self-serve platforms, but we also have new advertising inventory and affiliate partners that you can start to work closely with to monetize your audience and your content. So that's the 3 Ps, a framework that works across any sports organization, big or small. Now I'll just walk you through a selection of case studies for how WePlay utilizes the 3 Ps within our organization. So as I mentioned, we have the direct consumer product landscape, which is venues and live events, e-commerce, subscription video, membership and loyalty. So in the venue and live event space, obviously the world is a little bit different versus where it was, but we work with a lot of organizations on their venue and live events marketing. As we know, sport is driven by live events. So while the landscape is very difficult right now, venues will be back open soon. And in a global crisis, history tells us that sports and entertainment always bounces back very strong. So a couple of examples for you in this space. We work with the global leader in mass participation and endurance called Ironman. Our remit is global, working across multiple continents, growing their brand and increasing participation in running, swimming, cycling and triathlon events where we market direct to consumer. We also work with national governing bodies such as British Athletics, where they would have a full season of athletic events, and we work with them to drive attendance at their major events, such as the Muller Anniversary Games, which is held at the London Olympic Stadium. So we then have this aggressively fast growing area that's been a massive winner of lockdown, which is subscription video on demand and OTT. So we're active in this market. It's a fast growing landscape that includes rights holders, federations, broadcasters, tech companies, production studios, all competing for consumer attention. We work with abundance of these organizations such as ESPN, where the focus is on promoting live events as well as original programming. Objectives are new customer acquisition and retention. And we also work with the UFC on their UFC Fight Pass subscription video product. In e-commerce and retail, we work with a range of clients. Relevant examples here include the Ryder Cup, where we work with their governing body, which is the European Tour, and driving e-commerce sales. We also work with Ligue 1 champions, Paris Saint-Germain, on e-commerce, where we've seen incredible results across marketing campaigns, achieving very large return of ad spend for retail and merchandise of both kit, but also fashion range. In membership and loyalty is another fast growing area. With particular changes that are coming to cookies and data, the requirement to build an own database is becoming increasingly more important. So it's a developing area where we help our clients to develop compelling membership programs to capture new audiences into their database and nurture them to become a member. So the second of the 3 Ps is what we call partnerships. And it's the increasing revenue streams through the development of packages and partnerships through rights and content. And that starts first with the valuation of the content and the digital assets, then goes into the packaging of that, and finally the activation of those rights in accordance with partner objectives. The key point here is that digital sponsorship enables rights holders and organizations to support their commercial partners, whether automotive, luxury, FMCG, or entertainment brands, with activations that actually deliver against the partner's objectives, whether awareness, web traffic, leads, or actual sales. So we've got a few case studies here. For example, Yokohama Tires, who were 5 years on the front of shirt of Chelsea Football Club and are now the official tire partner. And we've been activating their brand specifically in 14 key markets, with the majority of those in the Asia Pacific region. We also work with 7-time European champions AC Milan across a wide array of work streams, including certain partners such as Rock Nation in EA Sports. Further case studies such as Paris Saint-Germain and Nivea, but also European Tour and Callaway. And the final of the 3 Ps is programmatic monetization. That's the monetization of audience and content through platforms and inventory and affiliate partners. Fairly new area. A lot of people would have been obviously very aware of how you monetize on YouTube, for example, through their AdSense program. But now we're looking at how rights holders and publishers can monetize directly as well. So first, it's about looking at the eligibility criteria. On Facebook, you need to have 1,000 followers as a minimum, and you need to have a large amount of engagement and views. Facebook has a creator studio, and similar to YouTube, which also has its partner program. YouTube, you need to have 1,000 subscribers. But the key thing here is that once you get active within these platforms, you can start to generate real revenues from your audience. Now, for sensitive reasons, I'm unable to share client names here, but we've seen fantastic success with our clients in this space. So the takeouts, firstly, the impact from COVID, whilst has created incomprehensible adversity, has created an opportunity for all organizations to reinvent how they engage audiences to drive new and sustainable growth. Growth in e-commerce and subscription video are being driven by increased digital consumption and spending. While traditional media is down 4%, digital is up 8% year on year and will continue to climb. Engaged audiences actually convert twice as frequently versus unengaged audiences and spend twice as much money. The 3 Ps of monetization is a practical framework for any audience owner to turn their audience into revenue. And finally, by investing in building your audience will help you to build your revenues and future-proof your business. That brings me to the close for today. Thank you very much for your attention. One final question for you all. Are you ready to win? Now, I'll leave this QR code on the screen. Feel free to take a picture. It links to all of our digital assets in our ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Thanks very much, Luca. That was fantastic and interesting and inspiring as always. We've got a couple of questions that have come through, so yeah, I'll just jump straight into them. The first one is the news that's just been confirmed in South Africa. It's big news for us anyways, that the British and Irish Lions tour is likely to go ahead as originally scheduled in South Africa, albeit without fans in the stadiums. That is something that will obviously present a different challenge to the Lions without their famous Red Sea of support to cheer them on. So just sticking to that theme around UK and European supporters, there's often a perception that it's easier to grow and engage fan bases in the UK and perhaps in some of the stronger football-linked European countries due to things like loyalty, affordability, ease of travel, that kind of stuff. Do you have a view on that? And perhaps could you talk to some of the work, a little bit more detail around what you guys have done outside of Europe, perhaps, or in sort of more challenging markets in terms of engaging fans?
Well, fantastic question. Thanks, Grant, for that. So I guess the first thing is that sports as a property and what sports brings to consumers is an aspirational entertainment vehicle. It's emotive first, right? It's not rational. So people follow sports because it makes them feel something. So whatever the sport is, people are going to engage with it. And what we've learned from COVID is that by taking sport and entertainment away from people is what starts to affect people's mental health. And that's been a massive challenge for a lot of people. The Lions tour coming back is a big signal of progress. And if you're working with the Lions and for them themselves, this is an opportunity to not only continue to penetrate regions and audiences that they would have already had an established market, but also looking at new audiences. So this is a massive opportunity for any major sports organization, whether it's the Lions, whether it's the Euros or the Olympics. that are all going to be challenged this year. This is an opportunity to do a couple of things. Firstly, if you can't get people to the event, then you've got to focus on how you create the most fantastic stay-at-home experience possible, where the best seat in the house is now the seat in your house. So that's a real consideration that these organizations have to think about, how they use today's digital ecosystem and innovation to make that seat in the house as if you were at the venue. And that's readily achievable, right? The second thing is then just looking about the build up, the during and the after of any event, because what we know from a lot of events organizations is that they rely heavily on the event and they don't necessarily fully invest in the build up and also what happens after the event. So I'd be looking at how they understand how they build an audience right now, building up to the event, how they maximize on the event window, and then continue to look at how that event and that audience stays with them, either through data on their CRM system, through an app, or through remarketing. And we've done a lot of this, working with a lot of clients, such as, like, I'll give you an example of Melbourne, because it's the one that that we've got in common. Is, we've worked with organizations like Melbourne on getting new audiences to attend their games. And that wasn't looking at the Australian market, that was looking at the international expat market and what is the emotive connection between people that are interested in going to major sporting events. And we've also worked with organizations like Red Bull across 65 markets, where the objective is not on getting people to each of those events, it's about on creating a story that is relevant to 65 different countries in different languages. And again, it's about finding that relevancy where that emotive connection that is synonymous with all fans can be then deepened through digital experiences.
Fantastic, thanks, Luca. Yeah, and so just in the interest of time, we've got one more. It's probably a little bit more localized. But how would you assist clients to build an audience that, if they don't actually have one to start with, how do you get going? Or if you've got a very small audience, how would you get going on that? And particularly, how would you engage with them if they're not, say, traditionally digitally savvy, I suppose?
So the first thing is it's all about the product. Okay, so if you don't have a very good product, it's going to be very difficult to build an audience that care, because audiences investing into following an audience, their most important commodity is not their money, it's their time. So you've got to have a product that has a value proposition that says, this is worthy of your time. So assuming that the organization has a good product, so whether that's their event, whether it's that communication or their storylines, that's the first thing. Now, if you've got a good product, now assuming that you have, then it's fairly easy to market because of the platforms that are available today where the audiences exist. You don't have to try very hard to find audiences. They are spending their time in these digital platforms. It's then just about bridging the gap for effective storytelling. So once you've built an audience, whether a small audience or a larger audience, then it's about looking at the journey that it's good that you want to take that audience on, and where you want to take them through being a follower to being a subscriber to being a customer. Now that journey will take time, but again, it all comes down to the value proposition.
Fantastic. Thank you, Luca. So I think that's it from you for now. Thank you very much. Your work is done for now, and we really appreciate your time. If there are any questions that come through, we might send them over and try and get some responses after the session from you. But thanks again, Luca.
Pleasure.
Right, on to our next guest. And just while Edgar turns on his mic, there he is. Just a reminder that this is going to be a Q&A section, so a little bit different from what Luca's just given us. So please do send through questions in the Q&A function on the screen. Edgar, thank you so much for making the time. I know that you have got up early this morning and left the trophy tour for your double trophy winning team out in Falvater, I believe. So thank you for driving through and getting to probably a slightly more stable internet connection so that you could join us today. Edgar, can you just tell us a little bit about that trophy tour? What's it been like? Specifically, I suppose, what's it like re-engaging with the fans, or in your case, I'd imagine engaging with them for the first time after such a long time not having them at Loftus for your home games?
Yeah, look, thanks, Grant, and thanks for the opportunity. Look, for us, it was important just to reach out to our fans, and even in just a controlled environment. You know, our catchment area for the Bulls is quite large. Obviously, as you mentioned, now this week we're doing Limpopo, and what we've seen, especially in the smaller towns and areas, there's a massive passion for the Vodacom Bulls, and specifically for the Currie Cup and that tradition around it. So just to see sort of the smiles on the kids' faces and the awe in which they look at the trophies is amazing to see, and you can see that in South Africa, rugby is still massive.
That's awesome. I saw on social media recently that you put up a picture of sort of yourself from, must have been 20 years ago, standing at the tunnel at Loftus. So must be an amazing feeling for you to re-engage with that trophy and obviously in the position you're in now. Edgar, so you've made a really impressive start to your career at the Bulls in especially difficult times. And I imagine that things like planning, multiple scenarios for what the pandemic is going to do and how it's going to play out has been particularly challenging. But I suppose more broadly, how would you reflect on your first 12 months as CEO, and what are some of the main challenges that you have experienced during the pandemic?
Yeah, Grant. I mean, as you said, it was a challenging start, but also it was unique in the fact that in professional sport you don't really get the chance to press the reset button. We had that opportunity to, because there was no sport for 4 or 5 months, you could press the reset button and really go and look at your structures and how you want to go forward. And the main strategy that we went with is that you really go and look at what is strategic spend and what is non-strategic spend. Now, strategic spend at the end of the day is what's going to guarantee future success, and obviously non-strategic is the nice to haves. And within that, a lot of opportunities came. I mean, we had to figure out ways to engage with fans that are sitting at home and obviously spending a lot more time on social media, as Luca mentioned earlier as well. And that's what part of our first step into the strategic spend was in creation of the app that we did in conjunction with Vodacom, which has had massive success. There's great engagement on there. It's exclusive content for the supporters. And it just brings them a bit closer to the team, even though they can't be at the stadium. And together with that, we did a lot of behind-the-scenes content for the supporters, and that sort of culminated in our running of the Bulls series that we ran on YouTube and on the app. It was a 3-part series, which was really something quite special in the end.
That's awesome. I mean, the app that you've obviously spent a lot of time on recently has clearly delivered on some of your objectives, and it's fantastic to see, and obviously ties in nicely with what we're talking about here. Just sort of taking a step back, I suppose, in terms of just looking at your experience, so obviously your time at the Lions and recently at the Bulls, how have you seen the rugby landscape in South Africa change over the last few years? And then I suppose looking forward, where do you see things going in future? And when you think of the platform you guys have built specifically at the Bulls, and some of the other developments like the MBM takeover at the Sharks, how do you see the landscape sort of developing over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think to start off with maybe the Sharks and our private equity deal 2 years ago, and obviously the Lions have had private equity for quite a while, and that's the only way forward for professional sport in South Africa, to get private equity back you. I mean, if we also look at the Six Nations and Pro Rugby with their deals with CVC, private equity plays a big part, and it also what it gives a union or a franchise is a really strong board that can guide you through tough times, that like we've seen now. So that's definitely the way forward. I think what we've seen change in the last 5 years is the way sponsors want to engage with the franchises or the teams. It's not just about having a logo on a jersey anymore. I mean, I think that's just part of the puzzle. Data is playing a big part, and how they can engage with your fans on various levels, whether that's social media or through an app or whatever that might be. And that's rights holders unfortunately need to position themselves in that way now, that rugby is a byproduct of what we do at the end of the day. We are a lifestyle brand now. We are content creating brand, entertainment brand. Rugby is just a byproduct. So the focus for us has moved away a bit from obviously right now they can't be in the stadiums, but it's engaging with the fan to get them to that conversion point, as Luca spoke about, and maybe going forward that the biggest portion of that conversion won't sit in people coming to the stadium, but rather through e-commerce or digital marketing to them.
No, it's interesting. It's a good way of putting it, that you know, rugby is the byproduct now, and you're much bigger and broader than that as a business. I suppose on that note, you know, the move into Europe is obviously a very exciting one, and I'm keen to hear, you know, what your ambitions are, and you know, where you sort of see the team going over the next little while. But just to stick with the fan base, how are you planning on, or how have you strategized around engaging with local fans? I suppose you were either invested in Super Rugby and perhaps haven't placed as much importance in Europe, or maybe lost, you know, sort of some of their interest in the Southern Hemisphere competition. And on the flip side of that, I suppose, how are you planning on engaging with European-based fans who don't know the Bulls or might have lost touch with South African rugby just by being out of the country over the years?
Yeah, I think for sort of the new fan or the fan in the UK, it's a great opportunity for us as the Vodacom Bulls to reintroduce yourself to new fans and start telling your story to them. Our first step into that was obviously just going back to our traditional colors in terms of our jersey. I think that's important, that you know what your identity is at the end of the day, because people can relate to that. And then, I mean, is a massive expat market that sits within the UK that obviously will support the teams when they're there, but also the UK supporters will more than likely pick sort of their second team outside of their Leinster or Munster or whoever their first team is, you know. And we need to position ourselves to be that second team, to be almost a sexy brand that people want to relate to and engage with. And that's again where, as soon as they get the behind the scenes content and that sort of thing that's on the app, it becomes more relatable. And when the team starts playing there, they feel like they know the players and they know a bit more about their personalities, which is quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully in years to come, they will be booking their tickets and bringing their pounds and their euros over to South Africa and pulling out after school.
Exactly.
Just in terms of the team and your ambitions for the team, and in terms of growth areas, I suppose broadly for the brand, the Bulls, moving into Europe, what are your ambitions and where do you see things going?
Look, I mean, it's no secret in sport you need to win. So obviously, I mean, I've said it from the start, you don't go into a competition if you don't believe you can win the competition. We've got a great team and a great coach that are all got massive ambitions. So, I mean, we're entering this competition to win it. But again, it's to grow your fan base over there. And hopefully, I mean, I think it's going to create some opportunities on the sponsorship front as well. Where companies that have businesses in the UK and in South Africa, it makes a lot more sense that they can invest in teams in South Africa at a rand rate rather. Where that was quite tough with the Australia and New Zealand competition. We didn't see a lot of international sponsors coming on board. So I think there's definitely opportunity going forward.
Fantastic. Edgar, I think just in the interest of time, I think we will probably wrap it up there. And as I said earlier, if there are any other questions that come through, we might send them over to you just to get them answered. But yeah, thank you so much, Edgar, for your time. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And if I can be so bold as to speak on behalf of most rugby fans in South Africa and saying that regardless of who you support, it's really exciting to see the success that the Bulls have achieved since you've arrived there. And we wish you, we wish that you will continue to raise the bar for all franchises in South Africa and hopefully move us forward as we move into this exciting new chapter in Europe. So all the best to you and thank you very much for joining us.
No, thanks, Grant. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks, Edgar. Right, on to our final guest today. As mentioned, Neil Jankelowitz, CEO and co-founder of Mscsports, will be touching on some of the pertinent points that Luca and Edgar have made today, as well as unpacking our impact marketing solution in a bit more detail with a particular focus on how it can deliver growth for rights holders in South Africa. So while Neil turns on his camera and his mic, he's got a couple of slides to run through and it won't take up too much more of your time.
Thanks very much, Grant. So I think firstly, I just want to reiterate gratitude to both Luca and Edgar. We really do appreciate you gentlemen, and for everyone else that has joined the webinar, thank you very much. And we sincerely appreciate your time. It's pretty easy, I suppose, to follow on from what Luca said and Edgar said, because I think, Luca's given us the framework of the future and Edgar's obviously bringing it to life in the South African context. But my job is just to kind of contextualize how we see this playing out in South Africa going forward. So, Luca, we do have a little bit more headwind down south than you do up north, although the sun shines more. Our economy is obviously under massive pressure. The debt to GDP ratio is at 77%. And we sincerely do have some real challenges around economic growth. And that obviously then, filters down into the sponsorship world in sport and entertainment. And I think the traditional revenue streams that we're all familiar with, sponsorships, ticket sales, are obviously under massive pressure. And as you alluded to, the real question then says, okay, well, where is the opportunity for growth? We all need to find growth, and where does it come from? And in our minds, there's a significant opportunity. I always like to refer back to my previous soccer coach, the late Eddie Lewis. I don't know if any of you know or knew Eddie, but the late Eddie used to tell us in the change room, you've got to control the controllables. And in other words, you've got to focus where you can actually make a difference. And Edgar, maybe to your point, we sincerely believe that that opportunity is singular, and that is about growing your audience. And in order to illustrate that in the context of South Africa, our Stratcoms team did a very interesting exercise, which I think will highlight this point. We looked at 10 franchises around the globe. And when I say looked at them, their social media following. So we're talking about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. And we then benchmarked their social media following over the relative populations in each country. So, for example, New South Wales, cricket in Australia, the Crusaders in New Zealand, Surrey Cricket County in England, River Plate in Argentina. And what we found is that on average, 8.5% of the population followed their teams or their franchises, in each country. When we then did the same exercise in South Africa and we looked at the social media following of the franchises and clubs across cricket, rugby, soccer, and the like. So the Bulls, you did a very good job, Edgar. You have done an excellent job. The Sharks, Pirates, Cape Town City, the Titans. And then we put that over the urban population in South Africa, so 38 odd million people. We found that the percentage is now 5%. And so that delta, that 3.5% for us is where we see a massive opportunity for each and every one of you as the rights holders of South Africa. Because that essentially equates to that third little icon, approximately 1.2 million new fans and audiences that you can attract to engage with, understand, and ultimately, participate from a revenue perspective with you as a rights holder. So if you then take that kind of key insight and say, well, what does it actually mean for us as rights holders going into 2021 and the future? I think first and foremost, we're not ignoring the traditional revenue streams. We actually believe, as I think, Luca's alluded to, if you want to enhance and attract more of, revenue from the traditional revenue streams, it's all about the audience. I think many of you would have read the Nielsen's reports recently around changing the value of sponsorship in 2021, where, and I quote, digital and social integrated opportunities are the most important rights when it comes to brands going forward. So if you consider that, the traditional revenue streams are going to be amplified by your ability to grow and engage with your audience. But very importantly, if you are able to grow and take ownership of your audience, ultimately you open up a new corridor. You ultimately diversify your revenue streams, going according to Luca's qualification of the D2C route, the direct-to-consumer route. And that ultimately speaks to the 3 Ps that Luca alluded to. It talks to what Edgar's spoken about, obviously around the app and creating opportunities to ultimately increase sustainability. And for us at Mscsports, that all then speaks to our core value proposition and what we'd like to offer you as rights holders, being able to deliver real impact through growth, going into 2021 and beyond. So, in a brief summary, we know that there's massive pressure in the South African context. That, in our minds, ultimately gives us a huge opportunity to focus on controlling the controllables. that for us is about growing and investing in your audience, which ultimately allows you to attract both traditional revenue streams, but certainly new revenue streams going into 2021 and beyond. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much. I hand back to you, Grant, and we hope that you've enjoyed your time.
Thank you very much, Neil. Short and sharp as always, and some really interesting and relevant thoughts there. Appreciate your time. Right, that is just about all we have time for today. Just a couple of parting thoughts. Obviously, firstly, thank you to everybody today for joining us. It's a real privilege to have you on here, and particularly, obviously, to Luca, Edgar, and Neil for your time and your insights. As I mentioned earlier, if you didn't have any questions answered during the session, we will do our best to respond directly with our thoughts when we share the recording of today's session. There is also a QR code on screen that you can scan, and it will take you to our website where you can send in any questions that you might think of after the session. A parting thought before we go, I would just like to point you in the direction of some of the ongoing content that our team at Mscsports is sharing via our social channels and on our website. A particular highlight is our monthly impact report, which focuses in on brands and rights holders that are challenging, inspiring, and shaping the world of sports and entertainment. A really interesting and bite-sized piece of content that's easy to sort of get through in our busy lives. Finally, as I've already pointed out, please do get in touch with us using the QR code on the screen, or follow us on our social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you would like to find out anything more about what we've discussed today, or even better, to explore how we can potentially deliver growth and ultimately deliver impact for you and your business. Thank you all very much for joining us, and have a fantastic rest of your afternoon. Cheers.